All right, round three. Typically, this doesn't happen, but guess what? We're going to crack this one back out. Radley Da Silva takes on Maxime Soucy. Battlefield Fight League 79 main event this Thursday night. Radley, thanks for joining me today, man. Now, I'm not going to touch on everything we talked about in the previous two iterations. We're going to make this one a little quicker, hopefully about 10, 15 minutes or so, maybe less. We'll see. But
Yeah.
let's just talk about coming into this fight week, man. Battlefield Fight League 79, as I said, it's fight week. And what's fight league like for you? Like, obviously, you don't want to go in there and be sparring every day leading up to the fight, but what's a typical fight week look like for you?
Just maintaining the weight, honestly, just keeping the weight off, nothing hard. Yeah, it's basically going in there, getting a sweat every day, and the training's all done. There's nothing you can do in the last week of camp other than hurt yourself if you're training that hard in the last week. And if you need to train that hard in like 1 week, you're not ready. So for me, I'm super relaxed, super chill, just keeping the weight off. And like I've been training my whole life, right? So nothing in a week that's gonna change.
Like you said there, lifelong martial artist. We've touched on this, but I'll ask you again then. 2013, you made your pro debut. You lost that fight, unfortunately. You moved on, fought again in 2013, and got your first professional victory against a very tough prospect at the time, Joe Prada out of Toshido. Just talk about, from there, you had a 6 year layoff before you got back inside the cage with Rives FC. Talk to me about that 6 year layoff and what that meant to you in terms of growth and all that other kind of stuff. Because obviously, it wasn't just growth inside the cage because you didn't get physically inside the cage in a professional fight, but you did grow outside of the cage, and that built you to where you are today. So tell me a little bit about the growth period over that 6 years.
Um, yeah, obviously 6 years is a long time. Uh, I've never stopped training ever, right? Martial arts is my life. Fighting is only just a part of it. So it doesn't matter if I have a fight or not. I'm always training. I'm always improving. And we saw the results of that after a 6 year layoff, going in there defeating a young prospect like John in pretty quick fashion. So to me, a layoff it doesn't mean much. It really just means more time for me to improve. And I've always been a performer my whole life. So as soon as the cameras are on and the lights are on, I'm performing at the highest levels. So I'm just used to that.
Over your time, speaking of being a performer, you were a part of the EA Sports video game. Tristan Connolly, obviously EA Sports as well. The last UFC game that came out, you told me previously that you're a big part of that. How cool is that to be a part of the EA Sports video game?
It's a life-changing experience, man. Like something I'll never forget. Something as I'm sure every kid growing up would dream to do. You know what I mean? So to be able to just go in there, turn on career mode, make a character, and literally play as myself, hearing my voice and everything, it's a dream come true for any kid growing up, and for sure for any fight fan.
Obviously, the goal for you is to get to the UFC. So I'm sure even bigger than you being in the video game as a career mode guy, a goal of yours in the future would be being in the game as yourself, correct?
100%. I thought of that exact same thing so many times when I was there. I'm like, man, it's only a matter of time before I'm actually in this game, and it's just going to be easier to play myself.
Flashiness is a key to your game. Can you tell me a little bit about that in the EA Sports universe? Because obviously, you're suited up with the motion capture stuff and flying kicks and all that kind of stuff. What was a day like in the EA studio?
It was just motion capture, imitating a lot of the fighters. I have I'm very gifted with being able to control my body, so I think that's one of the reasons they brought me on because I could turn on, I could mimic any fighter style just by watching them for like a minute or two. But luckily, I've actually been watching the sport since I was 8 years old. I'm a big fan, so I know every fighter. I know how they fight and move. So it was second nature for me to get in there and be able to mimic any style at any time.
Who is one of your favorite guys to emulate?
As a fan, I would at the time, especially, I would say Charles because he was, going through his crazy run at the time. So to be able to do him, I was like, yeah. But definitely the funnest one was probably the Israel Adesanya bow and arrow celebration. That's the most like iconic one right now. And yeah, I got to do that. So if you feel like it matched well, then I'll take the thanks for that.
That's awesome. All right, we got Battlefield Fight League 79 coming up. As we said, it's fight week. I spoke with Jay Golshani earlier this evening. I asked him if he was worried about any fighters making weight, who would they be on this fight card? And he didn't specifically say that he didn't think you would make weight, but he was saying how your last fight, it was up a weight class and now you're coming back down to 45. So I wanted to ask you, are you worried at all about your weight for this fight camp?
Not at all. Like, not even slightly close. I'm a natural 45er, and at the start, when we were trying to put this fight together, Jay was coming to me and saying that Maxime's camp was worried if I was going to be able to make weight. I just think that's a bit of an excuse. Like, if you think you're better than the guy, you shouldn't be asking weird questions like that. You should just accept the fight, and just the fact that they're worried about something like that just tells me that there's a little doubt in there, thinking if they can handle a bigger guy who can wrestle, and that's a nightmare matchup for anyone. I don't care how good you are. I mean, I've been wrestling since I was 14 years old and holding guys down 200 pounds plus black belts since I was 155, 15 years old. So it's going to be a nightmare in there for him going up against a guy who's naturally has a bigger frame and is a better wrestler. So you never want to be in that situation in the cage, and unfortunately for Maxime, he's going to have to go through that.
Well, wrestling was something that was sort of put on note in your last fight against Mike McAloon. You took him down at will. You were able to dictate the pace on the ground. You didn't get the finish, like you told me before. You're sort of frustrated about that. And you don't think that that necessarily put anyone on note in terms of the fact that you didn't get the finish, but you did dictate the pace on the ground. You moved around, you flowed like butter out there. Do you think that wrestling and jujitsu and stuff like that is sort of an underrated game on your part? And do you think that maybe Maxime will likely try to keep this on the feet because it's so unknown?
I wouldn't say it's underrated. I just think the last performance shouldn't really scare anybody who's like, if you feel confident in your ground game, you shouldn't be too worried about my wrestling if it was just from the last performance. I mean, I went in there after. Everyone's got to remember, I came off a 3-year layoff for that McAloon fight, so I was in there looking to get cage time. I wasn't frantically trying to go in there and finish him, and as well, I'm pretty sure he's a credentialed grappler himself, McAloon. I'm not even sure. I think he might be like a brown or a black belt as well. So and a bigger guy. So for me, I wasn't in there trying to rush to get him out of there. And if you're worried about my ground game off of just that performance, then that means you probably got some holes in your ground, and you really don't. You have to be a special ground fighter to be able to give me any problems down there. So for me in the last fight, I was looking to get the cage time. I wasn't in there trying to frantically finish it. I had taken a 3-year layoff, and this fight, I'm going to be coming off a 3-month layoff. I'm going to be so comfortable in there. Um, I can do whatever I want in there.
What I asked you earlier, what's the biggest threat of Maxime Soucy's game in your head?
His biggest threat, like, being realistic, not that it's a threat to me specifically, just because I come from such a kicking background my whole entire life. So it's not per se a threat to myself, but his biggest threat for other fighters would have to be his kicks. I mean, as far as his punches, they're not devastating. You saw him like unleash flurries on Nick Ouellette when he literally couldn't even lift his arms up, and it didn't phase him. But as soon as he landed the kick, it did. So I would say for other fighters, maybe his kicks. He has no power in his hands, but I would say his kicks for other fighters. For me, not at all. That's a plus for me. That's a bonus. If you're throwing kicks at me, that's fine. You're gonna get taken down, or you're gonna get kicked in the head yourself. So it's just a bad stylistic matchup for Maxime. I'm way too mobile on the feet with really good kick awareness. I've been throwing kicks my whole life, and I'm just a better wrestler who happens to be a bit bigger. It just you have to break it down statistically and be realistic about how the fight's going to play out. You can't just be, I'm sure you have to be confident at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, you got to look at it like stylistically, and it's just not a good matchup for him.
Like we saw in that last fight of Maxime's, Nick, obviously something went on for him to gas as hard as he did after that first round. You've never gone to championship rounds. Nobody knows what your gas tank's like. I'm sure it's great, but like, tell me, what's it look like when you move into these later rounds? Are you a guy who's going to be hunting from the get go in that very first round, or are you going to be pacing yourself because this is a 5 round fight?
I mean, in all my fights leading into them, I mentally expect a full 5 round war, 3 round war, whatever it is. I expect my opponent to be good enough to be able to take me there. And I've been an athlete my entire life. I started with capoeira, obviously, but in school I was doing so much cross country, so many long distance sports, and I know myself in and out. And it's just so sad that guys think that there's a problem there because ask anyone in the gym, the longer the rounds go, the better I get, the more I figure out, the more comfortable I get. It's just something that I know so deep inside me that when I get to round 4 and 5 in any setting of fighting, those are my best rounds. So I I don't even know if Maxime will make it to that, honestly, because the aggression I've been showing on the ground this entire camp, it's going to be very hard for him to make it 3 rounds if I get him on the ground.
Something you said in one of those interviews with Battlefield on their Instagram was that he's holding onto that belt like it's his baby. And it's just another day. You'll get that belt, you'll put it up at the gym, and then you'll walk away onto the next one. Do you feel like the fact that he is holding onto that belt and he is, protecting it and so worried about that belt could be a detriment? The fact that, he wants the belt so bad?
Um, I don't really care about that per se. Like, sure, he can hold on to anything he wants. He can hold on to his handkerchief. At the end of the night, I'm just in there to get my hand raised. Like I don't care what he thinks, what he feels. This is something I do every single day of my life. It's really just another day for me. That's what I mean. That's what I'm kind of more trying to get across. I'm not trying to make him seem like an idiot for holding on to the belt. I'm just trying to say like this is just what I do every day, man. And I expect to get belts. I expect to get more belts. I'm not going to be parading it around in interviews. And that's it. That's all I mean by that.
I feel like a lot of those times, sometimes they're told to hold the belt. Is
Yeah,
what I
exactly.
think. I'm
Exactly.
sure.
I'm not looking too deep into that. I was kind of, asked about that question. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
kind of pushed in that direction for that question. But at the end of the day, I don't really care what he's holding on to.
Of
Like I
course.
said, he can hold on to anything.
Fair enough. Now Thursday night, February 8th, you're in the main event. Your hand gets raised. What are you doing after the fight?
Ah, that's a new one. Man, I'm just gonna have dinner with my friends and family. Just be surrounded by my loved ones. This game takes such a toll on your relationships and other aspects of life that, to be able to after to decompress a little bit and spend time with my family, my newborn baby. It's just that's what I'm gonna be looking forward to the most.
One last thing. You said, before you got in there with John, or before you got in there with Mike, there was a 3.5 year layoff. You're in here in 3 months for this fight for the belt. Um, if it is February, we've got a whole calendar year ahead of us. How many more times would you like to get in the cage in 2024?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When I was in camp for this one, man, I have been in camp since last year, January, trying to get as many fights as possible. I was only able to get one. I've been scheduled for several, and even at the end of the year, I was a week away from another one. The whole event got canceled. So coming into this camp, it was at the end of it, like at a certain point, I was like, oh man, this is 20 days away. I'm like, this is so far away. It felt like forever. But now that we're nearing the day and it's just around the corner, I feel like I can go next month or as soon as possible. So I'm trying to get signed to the Contender Series by the end of this year. And I know 2 to 3 really good wins will get me there. And that's what I'm looking to do. And Maxime, I'm looking to walk right through Maxime. And it's just such a good matchup for me stylistically. There's nothing that he brings that I'm worried about. the thing he's most confident in, which is very weird, is his cardio for some weird reason. But yeah, so every fight I've watched the Maxime in the third round, he slows considerably. In that fight against Nick Roulette in round two, if Nick wasn't dead, like physically dead, if you look at Maxime, he could barely get a punch off as well. The commentators were asking, I'm wondering why Maxime's not throwing more punches. He looked tired himself after 2 rounds. So I don't really understand this notion of him thinking he's got cardio at all. That's one thing I'm very confused about. I've never lost a fight that goes to the decision, and I don't plan to. I can win by decision. I can win by submitting him. I can win by knocking him out on the feet. And I just want to go in there and honestly break him physically and mentally, and have him realize that there's something that he wasn't quite expecting, which was my pace and my cardio. Because I can wrestle all day, I can grapple all day. I've been doing it since I was a little boy, so I don't get why he expects me to have any sort of problem with cardio when I've been doing this since before he's probably been doing it. So that's how I feel about the fight. I'm excited about it. No disrespect to him and his team. We both got to be confident about our skill set. But at the end of the day, we both know I have a better skill set for MMA because he's a striker that likes to be on his back. I'm a striker that likes to be on top. And at the end of the day, that's what wins fights.
The Journey to Contender Series starts Thursday night for Radley Da Silva. He takes on Maxime Soucy. Battlefield Fight League 79 main event live on UFC Fight Pass. Radley, thanks for doing this again, man.
Yeah, bro. Anytime, man. Anytime.